it will not be realistic to just do a teacher's training and start teaching and think you can survive that way. This is a line within permaculture that's absolutely essential.
Hello, and welcome to the Permaculture Vine podcast, where we talk about permaculture, education, careers, and business. I'm your host, Cormac, and today we welcome Alfred Decker to the show. Welcome, Alfred.
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, thank you for accepting it. Do you want to just give us a quick 30-second introduction, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a permaculture educator and designer and consultant. I'm currently living here in this town in the foothills of the Pyrenees in Catalonia, Spain. And my focus these days more than anything is on permaculture teacher training in order to have a multiplier effect to spread permaculture as widely as possible.
Great stuff. Can't wait to get into all that. Do you want to just take us back to the start and where you came across permaculture?
Sure.
Where you first heard it?
Yeah. I'll never forget it, actually. So let's see, in the 1990s, early mid 1990s, I was very involved in the campaign to save the old growth native temperate rainforest of the west coast of North America, so United States and Canada. Because at that time, especially in Canada, these incredible old growth forests with trees wider than the stretch of my arms were being clear cut wholesale for paper and pulp and paper products, like making toilet paper and phone books. So one day I did an action where I hung myself in a platform up in the tree as part of an action to try and get media attention and for a day to stop the logging of these forests. And it's a long story, but just in short, you know, basically the police and the loggers showed up and they cut me down pretty quickly. But before they cut me down, I had a few hours of watching on one side the destruction of this forest, and on the other side of my platform up in the tree, this incredible forest. And I had this epiphanal moment of realizing that if we only are doing defensive actions to defend the planet, to save the planet, and if we're not creating the world that we want to live in, we're never going to be able to save the forests. And more so, my moment of realization was that even though I knew some of the charismatic megafauna of this forest, the bears, the wolves, the mountain lions, the big trees, other than that, I had no idea about how the ecosystem worked. I didn't know the species. I didn't know the functions. So it was just this realization that I was replicating a pattern of human apart from nature, man apart from nature, as opposed to feeling that I was a part of nature defending myself. So when I got out of jail for the protest, I was sitting at a cafe and I saw a poster up on the wall for something called a Permaculture Design course, where I would learn how to observe and interact with nature. And I realized that that was exactly what I needed to do with my life at that time. And it really turned out to be the case. I took that design course, I think it's 26 years ago now, and it really was a life-changing experience. And where now I'm personally focused in working to create models in agriculture, in architecture, and social organizations, and to tell a positive story. But I still think, I still believe that people need to defend nature or defend our social rights. But, you know, permaculture is more of a solutionary approach than a revolutionary approach. So this is the what I'm into, is trying to create the new world within the shell of the old world that's crumbling as we speak.
Well, there's certainly a lot of problems in it that need addressed. Quite fortuitous that you seen that sign in the cafe.
Yeah, really. Amazing how much that changed my life.
And doing that PDC, what was it like doing that PDC? Was that a 2-week PDC? And then compared to nowadays being a teacher training, have you any perspective on how good or bad that PDC was 26 years ago?
Yeah, fortunately, it was a very high quality PDC. I can now I can now really appreciate how good it was. The two teachers were these are American teachers in California, Penny Livingston and Brock Dolman. And they really, really had practical experience and skills, but as well, I would say that they were quite visionary thinkers, and very funny, very charismatic. So, you know, now as an educator, this many years later, I can really appreciate so much of what drew me into permaculture through their teaching. And a lot of it was just knowing that they're really speaking from experience, from practical knowledge. And we did a lot of hands-on work. And the course was at a fantastic permaculture demonstration site. So we could really see permaculture in action.
Yeah, that helps a lot when you can see it and it's evidence. There's no it's evidence right in front of your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do then? You got your PDC. Was that 2 weeks?
Yep.
And then what was the next step then?
Yeah. Well, then, you know, it was still mostly a few years after that, I was still involved in protest movements, in particular the anti-globalization movement, as it was called, the late 1990s, early 2000s. But, you know, in the United States, society changed so much after the attacks of September 11th. And it really became very, very difficult or sometimes impossible to protest, because what used to be protest, and which has a long and honorable tradition in American history, all of a sudden at that moment became terrorism or became anti-American and unacceptable. So at that time, after a few years, you know, maybe around 2003 or so, I started really focusing more on practicing permaculture, on growing food, on building, and getting skilled up. And I continued in that line until, let's see, I think it was 2009. I was living on a farm in France, and I was having a great time building hugelkultur garden beds, and just trying out all kinds of great techniques in permaculture. And I had this feeling that I wanted to begin to teach permaculture, to not just do it, but to teach it. And so one day a couple of friends were visiting, and I was showing them around the garden and around the farm. And at one moment, another one of these big moments in my life, kind of life-changing moments, I just said casually, you know, I'm thinking that I actually want to become a permaculture teacher. And they both just stopped, swiveled their heads, and looked at me and said, "You're kidding. We're looking for a permaculture teacher for 2 courses that we're going to be organizing this next summer," which was, you know, just a few months away. So it was one of those moments of be careful for what you ask for, because it might come true. So I of course had to accept their offer to be a permaculture teacher on their training. It was a training called Think Like a Forest: Art, Activism, and Permaculture. So it was a broad range course. But I went, after talking to them that day, I went back home and I looked up on the internet, Permaculture Teacher Training Europe, and I found that there was a permaculture teacher training by the person who would later become my mentor, Rosemary Morrow, a fantastic Australian permaculture educator. And she was doing a teacher training that summer. So in one day, I had an invitation to start teaching, and I signed up to take a teacher training course. And my life just kind of went on this path, and I never looked back.
Yeah, you sort of brushed past there the 9 years of permaculture experience, which let's focus more on that, because I think that's quite important, because a lot of people finish the PDC and just go right straight away when I teach.
Yeah.
But you actually went away and practiced
Yeah.
and got different. Were you different settings? Was it, or you say you were in France and the US?
Yeah, I was in California first, and then I was in Greece and France and Spain, and basically, you know, working on urban and rural permaculture projects, volunteering, sometimes working for pay, but really to a large degree focused on learning. because I definitely had the feeling after the PDC, which is, as you say, it's different from some people who think, okay, now I'm ready to teach. I had a very different feeling. I had the feeling of, I have a lot to learn. So, it's just trial and error, trying things out, seeing what other people were doing. I have to say YouTube videos and reading books were a fantastic way to learn. But I consider myself in a lifelong process of learning. It's not that I somehow got to some place and think, okay, now I know everything I need to know, and that's it. I mean, as you know, permaculture is such a broad, it encompasses so many fields, and there are so many new developments and new information that I'm just in now a lifelong process of learning. But I guess suppose I'm doing less practical hands-on work these days. I mean, I'm doing some. I just came from a garden that's kind of let's see, over here in this town. I was just setting up some garden beds where we'll do a sheet mulch tomorrow and get a fast start on a late start on some garden beds. So, but to me, right now I'm more interested instead. I mean, I love doing permaculture, and I really want everyone to go out there and do permaculture. But I've been inspired by this amazing mentor, Rosemary Morrow, to try to her idea is that there are a lot of people who have the skills to teach, but they lack the confidence and they lack the practical skills. How do you teach? And so her idea was to create a teacher's training that could have a multiplier effect, that could give those people who are ready to teach or are already teaching more skills and more confidence. And in doing so, this would have a multiplier effect on the spread of permaculture.
Yeah, it's definitely important. Our approach is trying to teach people about careers and business, and hopefully that's our multiplier.
Fantastic.
That's where we're trying to, and I'm learning in public, so I don't have all the answers. I'm just trying to curate all the answers. So when you were traveling and learning your trade, was that intentional, or was that just fortuitous again? Just, oh, there's a place, or was it I want to learn this topic and seeking out where to go and learn it?
I'd say it was both, because when I lived in California in the early 2000s, I really, I grew up in Chicago. I grew up in downtown Chicago, and I had very, very few practical building skills. I mean, really almost zero growing up. And so I really felt that I need to learn. I need to learn practical skills. So it was kind of, it wasn't like I set out on okay, for 9 years or something, I'm going to go to 5 countries, and it was more just life taking me to different and interesting experiences in Europe. But then also I did a postgraduate diploma with the Center for Alternative Technology in Wales, because I wanted to learn more about the theory of renewable energies and sustainable architecture. I had gotten some good practical basic building skills, but then I also wanted to complement that with theory around architecture and renewable energy. And then also during some of those years, I did take some more focused gardening and agricultural trainings. So yeah, and then twists and turns of life, some relationships, some other things happened in my life that sent me to different places. But I've kind of settled down here in Catalonia, and though I travel some, for instance, Cormac and I met in Derry a few months ago, and I was doing a training there. So I still want to continue traveling, but I'm pretty set to that my base will be here in Catalonia. And what I want to continue to teach. I also do consulting, but I have to say I find that here in the Mediterranean, as a foreigner, It's hard. It's hard to make a living. I'll speak personally, but I know many other people who have a similar experience as a permaculture consultant. It's hard to make a living doing most things. It's hard as a foreigner coming in and starting a business. I know that when I first started about 15 years ago doing consulting, there was an article in a financial, I think it was Financial Times, that rated Spain as the second hardest country in the world besides after Japan for a foreigner to come and start a business. So there are, thinking about consulting and business, there's lots of opportunities here, but there's lots of challenges as well. And I have to say that I find education much more rewarding, and there's just so much less fewer challenges and stress that personally yeah, I find sometimes a little bit like, oh goodness. But I think we need permaculture business and consulting here as much or more than anywhere else.
Yeah, great stuff. Maybe too because you find that the teaching easier because is your reputation, because you've gained that reputation over many years. So would it, you sort of earned your stripes and you're able to get the bookings for the education and the.
I think it's more actually it's more just about how people do business here, which is just different from a more Northern European or Anglo-Saxon way, or or North American way. I mean, like here, for example, to get permissions to renovate homes or build or do things on a terrain, my goodness, the bureaucracy, the problems that the local councils put up. I mean, really, basically, another problem here is that a lot of these things like permaculture and renewable energy and so on, they're coming here later than they are to Ireland, UK, Germany. And so a lot of local councils or municipal architects really have no idea about what's happening. And so for them, it's a little scary, actually. Renovating a house for energy efficiency, there's a lot of techniques that they just don't know about. And so if they feel put in the spotlight when my clients ask for permission for some of those things. Or for example, I have another good friend who's a green building consultant, and he himself bought a dilapidated old building in the mountains here in the Pyrenees, and was requesting permission for different things for renovating his house. And at one point, the municipal architect said, you know what, I just need to come up and look at the site. And is that okay? Yeah, sure, fine. So the architect came one day and at one point said to my friend, look, I gotta tell you, I don't really know a lot about what you're talking about here, but if you're willing to really explain it to me and teach me about it, then I'll probably give you the permission. But really, the thing is that here, and it's not only here in the Mediterranean, of course, in many places in the world, but I find it particularly more that there's a sense of, if you apply for permission to do something, unless it's a big casino that's going to have an obvious economic benefit to a local municipality, if you apply for permission to do something, the answer is going to be no. Probably. It starts with a no. And then maybe if you fight for 5 or 10 years, maybe you can get a yes. But it's not that the local council or the architect is here to help you. It's the opposite. They're here to fight against you doing anything. And there's different reasons for that. One is that in Spain, there was a huge overbuilding boom, construction and tourism boom after the dictatorship ended. So late 70s, 80s, 90s, up until the crash of 2008. It was said that the sky was raining bricks. There was so much construction, and so much of it was poor quality, poorly designed, stuff that should never have been built. And now there's millions and millions of abandoned buildings with the roofs falling in. So, okay, the governments want to avoid that. Great. But still there's a sense that that no, we don't want we don't want anything. We don't have to do anything that's not outside of our narrow purview or that's not a clear economic tax benefit for us. And so again, I think it's really, really necessary, the more and more permaculture consultants we have working in this context. But maybe I'm admitting to you that as a 53-year-old father of 6-year-old twins, who's had enough years of trying to convince local architects and councils to just say yes and give permission to do something that makes sense ecologically and economically. Right now, I'm just a little bit kind of a little bit tired of that. And by contrast, when I do a training or I do a course, it's almost always an entirely positive experience.
Well, I think even here in Northern Ireland, the planning laws for a normal house are difficult. I was trying to get out. The houses can't be the same, but they can't be too much difference.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, and again, it's these gray areas, and it's up to interpretation.
Yeah.
Let's take it back now again to your teaching training. You've done your time. You've been about the place. You've learned, and then you took the Rosemary Marrow's teacher training.
Yep.
What was that like?
Yeah. So it sounds a bit cliche to say that it was a life-changing experience, but it was a life-changing experience. I mean, I really went into it. Let me tell you, I was nervous. I was nervous going into this training as a student thinking, do I know enough? Do I have enough experience? Oh my goodness, my other students are they're these fabulous permaculture experts and so on. And so I came into it really feeling, am I going to be good enough or experienced enough to teach permaculture? And I left a week later feeling, who am I not to be a permaculture teacher? That by all means, I'm in a lifelong learning process. And some fields within permaculture, I'm stronger. Other fields, I'm weaker. I need to spend more time, more experience, more learning, and more trial and error. But it was just a very, very empowering experience because the way that Rosemary has organized it, it really gives you that sense that that you can do it. And not only that permaculture needs more people to get out there. And something that I find really special about this training and special about, I guess, the profession of permaculture teaching is that there's a really strong sense of solidarity and collaboration between people working in the same field, which, if you think about most fields, if you have a training, there's a lot of competition. Of course, people want to be the best, want to stand out, they want to be the top in their field. But that's a scarcity approach. And of course, in permaculture, we have more of the abundance, the idea that there's enough for everyone. And so for me, as a permaculture educator, following this idea of abundance, I feel absolutely convinced, and every year that passes, more convinced, that the more permaculture educators that are out there, the better, even the better for me in my own narrow self-interest, because permaculture will spread more widely, and then there'll be more opportunities for everyone. Which isn't to say that there aren't sometimes conflicts of interest about, okay, who will teach a PDC in this region, and will there be enough public for more than one PDC? Of course, I mean, this is the real world. But there's still, in these teacher trainings, there's a real sense of that we give each other a helping hand up, compared to, I still remember reading one American novelist, Ernest Hemingway, was said to be very good to give his fellow novelists a helping hand down. That always stuck with me, that idea. But in permaculture, I really see it that generally, as educators and as practitioners, we want to give each other we do give each other a helping hand up, because we believe in the abundance model. And we believe that if we're going to scale permaculture up to the level that's required to meet the challenges we're facing around climate, around collapsing economies, around the rise of the far right, and you know, mass migration is only going to increase. It is not going to decrease. So then, how do we engage with that? And if we have the far right in power, that means conflict, it means violence. So there's all these challenges. And if we want to address them through permaculture, we need more people, we need more skilled people and educators.
Yeah, I definitely think with permaculture too, there's that many, it all depends on circumstances where you are. And everybody almost could have a niche with the amount of, and you can just have your speciality. So to me, it's very hard to compete with people because everybody's context is different.
Yeah.
And what they know is different. And that's what I found. I mean, people are more than happy to help and collaborate rather than compete. So how did you do your teacher training with Rosemary Morrow, and then you come out after that? Do you go looking for a teaching job? Do you do your own courses? What do you do then?
Yeah, so it was a combination of looking and putting the word out. But fortunately, I already knew I had enough contacts that after I had done this teacher training, and I was really making it clear, okay, I'm not really looking to teach. It was just a question of time and effort and in the beginning, there were plenty of courses that only had a few people or were canceled because there were not enough people. Also, I wasn't making a living fully by teaching because I had just started. So it's a question of there's a phrase I like, patience and perseverance made a bishop of his reverence. Anyways, you just keep going, you keep at it, and really what I see is that when people are passionate about something, and when they have patience and when they're really dedicated to it, oftentimes things will open up, things will work out, and they'll be able to develop a career and be able to pay their bills, either wholly or partially. Of course, there's good advice, such as don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't count on just teaching to pay your bills. Also do consulting, or maintain whatever other work you've had, what other career you have that can sustain you as you're making this transition. I'm thinking about, I once went to Sepp Holzer's farm in Austria and did a training for a weekend with him and his son Joseph. And what Sepp talked about is in the 80s, he was growing mushrooms, but also had lots of other crops. But at one point, South Korea in 1 year flooded the market with cheap exports of edible mushrooms and crashed his mushroom business. But because he had multiple streams of income, he didn't go out of business. So I think it's for most people, generally, it will not be realistic to just do a teacher's training and start teaching and think you can survive that way. But it can be part of a process that, along with other revenue streams, you can go in the direction you want to and ultimately make a living.
Yeah, that's right. Well, any advice for aspiring teachers, someone who just wants to be a teacher? What steps should they do apart from take your course?
Yeah. Yeah. Apart from taking my course. Well, there's different ideas and very different ideas about what is required to teach permaculture here in Europe, for example. So I'll just speak to the European context. But there's overall a consensus among most permaculture educators here in Europe that to be a teacher on a PDC, the lead teacher that will sign a certificate for the people who've done the PDC, that they need to have done a permaculture diploma. And increasingly, there's the requirement among national permaculture associations that lead teacher needs to have done a teacher training as well. But there's so many other opportunities for teaching aside from being the lead teacher on a PDC. You could be the assistant teacher on a PDC. You could be, a guest that comes in on certain sessions. If you're wanting to get started in permaculture, you could propose to shadow the teachers on a PDC, meaning it could be as simple as just watching them or being able to sit in meetings of the teaching team, and watch behind the curtains as they talk, as they organize, as they reflect on how the course is going. You could ask to be an assistant teacher, either paid or volunteer. But then also there are just an unlimited, the only limitation is the imagination in the teacher's mind of the different ways and different opportunities for teaching. But for sure, my experience was that when I was starting, that giving free workshops was a great way to start getting experience, to start trying things out as a teacher, to make mistakes, to learn. And that really, if an event is free, and if the teacher is there earnestly doing the best that they can and with enthusiasm for their subject, there's generally a very high tolerance from the participants, from the students. By contrast, the opposite is also true. If participants are paying, they often have a higher demands and higher standards, and they'll expect something different. But that's just a great way to get started. Is Friday night lecture on permaculture gardens, or Saturday morning up until lunch a permablitz, or a hands-on practical permaculture gardening session at this community garden. It's just there's no shortage of ways to get started, but it just takes that kind of confidence or that craziness to put yourself out there in front of people, and just that faith that we need people doing it, and permaculture, we wanted to get it out there, and so just going for it. But for me, it really took doing that teacher's training to really have the confidence. I mean, probably with time, if I hadn't have taken that training with Rosemary, sure, I would have found my way, but I think it would have taken a lot longer. And also, one thing that I think is important about this teacher training is that it really emphasizes a non-formal education approach. So as opposed to the educational experience that I had largely in my life, which is formal education in school and at university, which is there's one teacher and they are in the front above us, above the rest of us students, downloading their information and wisdom to we students who are the empty glasses, that are absorbing their knowledge and wisdom. And it's very passive, it's very hierarchical, it's not very empowering. And so what I love about this teacher training is it's the opposite of that. It's very empowering. It's very, it's in this non-formal educational approach. And so if I had not have done that training, I think it just would have taken me a lot longer to really learn how to do this approach. I think I would have instead taken a formal educational approach and applied it to permaculture education, which is basically then me standing in front of the class for the whole time lecturing, which, a good lecture or a good PowerPoint can be an absolutely great teaching method. It's clear. But if you do it over and over and over again for 2 weeks, I mean, I've heard of, well, I know that Bill Mollison and Jeff Lawton used to do PDCs of just 72 hours of them chalking and talking, of just them on top of a stage, talking, lecturing, writing on a board. And even though they're incredibly knowledgeable, fantastic storytellers, as learners, we can only absorb a certain and retain a certain amount of information through just that one method. But if we're not involved, if we're not participating in our learning, our learning is quite limited. So I really appreciate this approach that I learned of, as much as possible, getting people active, getting people involved, getting people doing hands-on activities, small group work, because we know from academic research as well as experience that people learn better that way, as opposed to just sitting and listening to a lecture.
Yeah, I did Jeff's online course, 72 hours, but it was stretched over a number of weeks. Uh, I certainly couldn't sit 72 hours in front of a course. But then that takes me to your course. That's what we done with the seats. Are you done with the seats at the start? You lined them up.
Oh,
For your course, I did with you on the sociocracy course.
yeah,
Basically, then that was we talked about there was the first exercise, getting everybody involved and
yeah.
changing it up. But so what do you teach? You teach the PDC. Yeah, obviously that course was in sociocracy. What else do you teach?
Yeah,
Okay.
different types of social permaculture, teachers trainings. I used to do introduction to permaculture. I don't do that anymore just because there are a lot of people doing that. Relatively a larger amount of people doing introduction courses. But really, right now, I'm more interested in teacher trainings and social permaculture because again, this is an influence of Rosemary Morrow on me, which is that she believes, and I wholeheartedly agree, that in permaculture, okay, we have these three ethics: care of the earth, care of people, and fair share. So one, and really the second and the third are largely human, social. But in permaculture, I think probably 80% of what we do is about the first ethic, taking care of the earth. And on one hand, that's great. I mean, people are attracted to permaculture because we love the earth, we love nature, we love taking care of the land, we love growing things, we love seeing nature prosper and helping to recover and regenerate some of the landscapes that humans have damaged. But the reason that so often we can't scale up, the reason that so many permaculture projects fail, the reason that community gardening projects fall apart, it's not because we lack ecological knowledge, it's because we lack social knowledge. That we're comparatively good as permaculturalists at analyzing the ecological microclimate of a physical site, but we're comparatively poor at analyzing and understanding this social microclimate. How do we work together? How do we live together? How do we collaborate together? How do we build a society based on cooperation instead of competition? And that is the problem. And it's a problem not just for permaculture, but for any kind of alternative to the dominant way of doing things economically and with governance. So for me personally, even though I love working with my hands in the dirt, I feel compelled now to spend more time working on the social microclimate, on living together, working together, and on governance systems like sociocracy, as opposed to just teaching gardening courses.
Yeah, I think that's where our sort of podcast fits in as well. Although I wouldn't have called it sociocracy, but it's because a lot of times, when I started sort of learning in permaculture, a lot of people talking about social permaculture, and I didn't really understand much about it until I done your course, the 3-day course. And before that, I would have thought, oh, bunch of hippies, sort of this type of attitude. Oh, it's for it doesn't concern me. I'm grand. I'll stick to my own garden. I'll stick to my own. I'll be all right. So doing the course was definitely an eye opener, and it was a good education for me. Still, I wouldn't claim to know a lot about it, but I am finding out that one of the course made me realize I was doing a lot of the stuff anyway. I just wasn't calling it social permaculture. So when people say social permaculture, I was like, I sort of repelled by it, but then it's actually I was doing most of it anyway, but I just wasn't calling it social permaculture. And I think for me it was a good way of sort of blowing that sort of thing out of the water, and I knew more about it then when people were talking about it. So that was
Yeah,
my observation from the course, was actually doing a lot of it. But then some people still say to me, "Oh, I have no time for that. Just get on growing your food and producing." And
yeah.
I think it is good for people whose voice may not get heard, having them things in place. But also, I like about permaculture is there's all these different ecosystems that can coexist,
Mhm.
from like the Paul Wheaton type dictatorship. No, if that's what your thing is, you know what he's doing, you go over there and you do it. If sociocracy, if that's happening over here, you go over and do it. That's what I like about permaculture. It sort of embraces it all, and that's why I
Yeah.
don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, no, I really resonate with that. And
Mhm.
but I want to make something clear. I'm not saying that anyone needs to stop their gardening or their forestry work or any of that and become urban activists or something like that. I'm not saying that. It's just that it's just the recognition that, you know, urban areas occupy only something like 4% of the land mass. Well, this was maybe 15 years ago. Now probably it's more. Certainly it's more. But a relatively small percentage of the land mass is urbanized. Yet that small percentage of space generates about 80% of the pollution and consumes about 80% of the resources. So it's just the recognition that if we want to protect the countryside, you know, it's really the urban areas that are generating the pollution and extracting the resources from the countryside. So permaculture somehow by some people needs to be implemented and needs to, in the cities, and in the cities, permaculture needs to be something that is useful, that works in the big cities, or else there's just, you know, there's just a limited impact that the permaculture can have in the countryside. Also, I often do this slideshow where I look at the trajectory of permaculture since it started in the 1970s in Australia. And I show at first kind of a provocative slide, which is kind of a hippie guy in rainbow colored clothes with a chicken, and it's kind of like this, you know, hippie Australian paradise. And, you know, I just say, look, it's great that this is maybe the population where permaculture started, but if we're really going to confront the climate emergency, we need to get permaculture as well into cities. Um, and that's all. And also sometimes I have the sense that yeah, I just want permaculture because permaculture can be applied in the cities, and there are amazing permaculture projects happening in places like Tokyo or in Sao Paulo in Brazil. And permaculture really applies well in places, especially in places where there are not so many resources. And our techniques can be used well in the favelas of Brazil. And so I have the inspiration to, while still living here in Spain, to help support people who are working in those places. And fortunately, over the years in the teacher trainings, there have been a lot of people who've come that are working in cities. And so I'd like to see permaculture being spread through them.
Yeah, I think my perspective over the last few months has changed in terms of uh, wanting to get out to the country, out to multi acres, and then realizing, well, I can barely manage 1/10 of an acre, much like yourself of a young family, and it's like, how am I going to manage multi acres
Yeah,
and all these things? It's like, right, well, just sort of settle down, uh, sort of build a demonstration site here where I am on a small urban plot, and then see where that takes me.
yeah,
Run a few workshops. So your workshop did help me in that way as well, to sort of clarify that you didn't need to just escape to the country. So
yeah.
thanks very much for that. I did enjoy the 3 days.
Brilliant. But can I just
Um,
jump in before you ask a question? I just want to jump in there. I just want to say that I am so much, I so much more encourage people to do what you just said, which is start small, start with a demonstration project that is manageable, and do it well and go from there. Because I have made the mistake, and I've seen so many other people make the mistake of thinking, oh, to do permaculture, I need to have a farm like Sepp Holzer's, 40 or 80 hectares. It needs to be a massive landscape, broad scale, blah, blah, blah. And then it just doesn't, it's too much. And then it doesn't work out. And that is so much, it just creates frustration and burnout. And it's just so much better to follow the principle of small and slow solutions and build up from there. So I just wanted to highlight what you saying that I'm just really, for every mega broad scale big permaculture rural project, great. I'm thrilled that it's out there. But I think the 30 other ones that are smaller and more manageable and more realistic are just as valuable in the work that they do. Because also a lot of people might see a farm like Sepp Holzer's and think, oh gosh, I can't, if this is permaculture, I can't do this,
I
So
think I get caught up in that as well. Even on the urban scale, you see like Jeff Lawton, he done a series there a while back, and it shows you these, and everything was packed and intense. And
yeah.
it was like, all right, then that's a 10 out of 10, but you don't have to hit 10 out of 10. You can be a 2 or 3, but at least you've started. And that's 20 to 30% closer to where you need to be. Um,
Yeah.
so we love and we learn.
Yeah.
So do you teach a permaculture for refugees course as well?
Yeah,
You want
yeah,
to tell us
yeah.
about that?
So I've done so basically I keep on talking about this person, Rosemary Morrow, and her influence on me, but she really just has had a profound influence on me. And so two of the things that she has done within her career in permaculture, one was to create this permaculture teacher training that's based on more than 40 years of her experience traveling all around the world, a lot of times in the global south, in conflict zones, in post-conflict zones, as well as the Western world, and taking all of this experience and putting together teacher training. But then she also created a network called Permaculture for Refugees. And this project has done, let's see, I think 8 PDCs in refugee camps in the Middle East and in the Asian Pacific regions. And right now, Rosemary was just in Bangladesh. She's now in Vietnam. And so, yeah, so then that's then been, so at one point, I had the idea, how about combining these two main strands of Rosemary work and creating a permaculture teacher training with a focus on refugees as learners, as permaculture students. How can we make permaculture um, as valuable, as useful as possible? And how can we teach in such a way that it meets their learning needs? So I've done now 2 of these specialty teacher trainings, and then there'll be a third one again in November here in Spain. And I have a wonderful, wonderful teaching team with Sunita Emba, Yao Fan, and Habiba Youssef. So teachers originally from Cameroon, from Hong Kong, and from Lebanon. Wonderful permaculture educators. And so we have this teaching team with this specialty focus. But if any of your listeners want to learn more about permaculture for refugees, just do an internet search with those 3 words and you'll find this network. And there's lots of great resources and stories about the experiences of what people are doing within it.
Great work. Alfred, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah. That actually, I mean, I'm really thinking about permaculture consulting and permaculture business. I think this is a line within permaculture that's absolutely essential, because right now we still, I think within permaculture, like most places in most aspects of life, money is the elephant in the room. People are uncomfortable talking about it. We don't have enough working models, and so I think that I really like this line that you're working with, Cormac, and I think that it's just fundamental to understand economics and then use permaculture ethics and principles to reshape it. And there's some really exciting work being done, but it's not enough, and we just need more. We need to. I think we need to understand that so for many years, I've heard a criticism of capitalism and a criticism of mainstream economics, that economics is a form of brain disease, and that makes me laugh. I think it's largely true, because the majority of economists don't understand that there's no jobs on a dead planet, or that continual growth on a finite planet is a dead-end future. Or you could also say that growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell. I mean, these are all really good criticisms of mainstream economics, but still, we need to obtain a yield. We need to feed ourselves. We need to pay our bills. So, the question is, how do we do that while still working within the ethics and principles of permaculture? So I want to continue to see more about the podcasts you're producing and the people you're talking to about that.
That's great. Thanks very much. We actually have our own course that we have out, where we take you from like graduating from a PDC, teaching digital design. So to create nice digital drawings, build your portfolio website so you get your name out there, and then our plant database Gilda to help you build guilds. So you select like if you want an apple tree in zone 7, you type in, it'll give you the correct apple tree for that area, and then a list of pollinating plants or supporting plants then. So it'll help you build that guild of plants. So you sort of get you started in your professional design journey. So that's at PDCD Pro. So I didn't ask permission for that. It was just from in terms of it was like something new. So there's nobody out teaching there. So it was like, right, this was our experience learning. Now, in saying that, Crystal is she's done more of Gamble's teacher training. And she has 3 PDCs, I think. So she's our head designer. So that's our course. And that's at pdcpro.com if any of our listeners are interested.
Wow, fantastic. I want to take a look at that. That sounds great.
Yeah. Guys, that's been Alfred Decker on the Permaculture Vine podcast, and I'll chat to you all next week. Thanks very much, Alfred.
Great. Thanks so much, Cormac. Take care.